I'm Nina van Tilburg for Biznews, and with me is DA Abroad's Global Chair, Ludré Stevens, and we're going to talk about the online overseas registration that is taking place from October. Hi, Ludré. Welcome again to Biznews.
Thank you, Linda. It's nice to be here.
So, they delayed the date. It was supposed to be early October, but now it's going to be a bit later for overseas. Second delay.
Exactly. So it's supposed to go live today with that. So they're supposed to go live today with the overseas registration for South Africans living abroad. And they announced yesterday that it'll now only go live on the 24th of October. So it's delayed by 2 weeks. This is the second delay. The first one, it was always supposed to go live on the 6th of October first, then it delayed until the 10th, and now the 24th. So another 2 weeks.
So why is it important to South Africans to register overseas? Is it now much easier?
Well, so this is the first time ever that we'll have online registration for overseas voters, and this is game-changing because previously you could only go and register to vote at the embassies in person around the world, and so that meant obviously we had loads of physical barriers from registering. So now we can do online voter registration, and this is game-changing. And there's a few reasons why you have to go register. The first thing is you cannot vote if you are not registered. That's as simple as that. And so if you don't register, the battle is lost already. So number one, you can't vote without registering. Number two, we're now in the age of coalition politics in South Africa. And so we've seen in the last two years and a bit with the various coalitions in SA, you either have stable coalitions run by the DA and its coalition partners where it's based on principles and values, or you have coalitions of corruption where the various other parties do horse trading and, just kind of run the cities into the ground. And often, with a majority of one councillor and one seat, are you able to form a stable coalition or not? And also, the way that our politics works with proportional representation. So let's say, for example, every member of parliament seat is about 50,000 votes, and there's 34,000 votes, and that thing gets rounded up to a full MP, and that becomes an MP of the DA. That means suddenly with one seat, we form a coalition that is stable and gets our country out of this mess of streets exploding and corruption and cadre deployment and load shedding. So we can now register to vote online overseas. Why wouldn't we do that? Like, why would we just grab this opportunity and be part of that solution?
Yeah, and I always think, why moan if you don't vote?
Exactly.
So if you want to change the system, go and register and vote. So what are the scenarios? So you're a brand new voter. What do? You're already on the voters roll, or you might just be in South Africa, but you might be overseas at that time. And you think, why don't I go and vote at my local embassy?
Absolutely. So there are three scenarios for overseas voting and registration. It is, as you mentioned, the first one is I'm a brand new voter. So I've just turned 18 and I'm a South African citizen and I live overseas. Or I've never voted before and I want to vote this time. So brand new registration. The second scenario is you are on the voters roll and you want to change it to an overseas mission. So you previously registered in South Africa and you want to move to the overseas mission, or you moved from Australia to London and you want to move it from that point to the other point. And then third scenario is a temporary overseas vote. So you want to keep your voting station in South Africa, but you're going to be overseas for work, holiday, visiting family, and you want to vote then. So that's called the Visa 10 process. So the first two scenarios you can do already when they go live on the 24th of October. And the third scenario you'll be able to do with a certain amount of weeks just before the election. But if people just follow us on the DA Abroad website or DA website and sign up to our alerts, we will let them know how to register, when to send the Visa 10 forms, and also answer any questions. But yes, all three scenarios: new registrations, change your voting station, and temporary overseas voting stations will be available via the same service.
So what do you need? Passport and ID?
Unfortunately, yes. Right now, the IEC is making us use, you have to have a valid passport and an ID book or smart card. We are going to try and fight this a bit more, but as it stands right now, you have to have both. Now, we understand that South Africans living overseas don't always have both, and many people have had many issues trying to renew their passports with just ridiculous turnaround times. So we ask people to do three things. One is, if you are going to South Africa for Christmas and this December holiday, please go and renew your passport and ID whilst in South Africa. It takes 5 days. It's a nice fast service. Please just do it there. However, if you're not going to go to SA between now and the end of the registration period or the election period, then just contact your local embassy or consular service and apply for it now. But thirdly, if you have any problems, if you've been waiting for a long time, or the embassy doesn't respond to you, or the turnaround time is just too long, please again contact us, the DA Abroad at contact@daabroad.org. We have an escalation service that we use to highlight those issues with the Department of Home Affairs. So I know it is a schlep to have your passport and ID, and I know it feels like there's this insurmountable admin thing if you don't have one or the other. But the thing is this: you cannot register if you don't have, if you can't vote if you don't register, and just please apply for the ID and passport. So there's three processes. Do it in SA when you get there, or contact your embassy right now, or please contact us and we'll help you if there's problems with the local embassy.
And then there's the issue of where you can vote, because at the moment you can only vote at embassies, and we've recently interviewed the IEC and they say that's not going to change.
Yes, so the IEC has to follow the Electoral Act, and the Electoral Act says that you can only vote at foreign missions. So these are embassies, consular services, and high commissions. Now, the Department for International Relations and Cooperation, DIRCO, can actually they are responsible for designating overseas missions. So the DA is launching a fight to request DIRCO to designate additional overseas voting stations, overseas missions, so they can act as voting stations. So in 2019, the IEC made 125 voting stations available overseas. Our best estimate that we need another 13 to cater for the high density South African locations around the world. So we're saying instead of doing 125, we want 138. So this doesn't break the bank. It doesn't break logistical barriers from before. The only difference is DIRCO has to designate additional sites. And so we are launching an official process via parliamentary procedure. And if that doesn't work, we will go to the courts in order to request more voting stations, because they cannot deny us our voting rights. If they're giving 125 other locations with low density South African populations voting rights, why not these other 13 missing ones? So I think people know the DA by now. You know, as I mentioned in our previous interview, that the DA won an 8-year court case battle against Home Affairs to get people who lost their South African citizenship, get it back. Those people who lost it automatically. It took us 8 years and we got there. And, you know, so there's a well-trodden road for us to fight for what is right. And so, obviously the IEC has to say they can't make more voting stations available because it's not up to them. But we're gonna work to get DIRCO to designate more sites so that IEC can have more voting stations over there.
Yes, I think for South Africans who might not understand, if you are live in Scotland, you've got to fly to London. If you live in Cairns, you've got to fly to what is it?
Exactly.
Sydney, or where's the?
So if, for example, in Australia, the capital city of the country is Canberra, and the embassy is over there. So in Australia, you would have to, in the old way of doing stuff, fly from Perth to Canberra or fly from Sydney to Canberra. And so we are going to push for voting stations in Perth, Sydney, Adelaide, Brisbane, Melbourne, in addition to Canberra. And same thing applies to New Zealand. So in New Zealand, you can only vote in Wellington. We are going to push for Christchurch and Auckland as well. Same thing is going to happen in Canada. We're pushing for more voting stations. Same in the UK, not just London, but also Belfast, Manchester, and Edinburgh. All these places where there are South Africans who are now being denied the ability to vote because of just this admin perspective. However, we obviously need people to register overseas because those registrations will make our case easier to get more voting stations. So no matter what you do, even if there isn't currently a voting station nearby you, please just register, because that's the first step in us being able to get more voting stations, ideally local, more closer to people.
In the US, is it in Washington?
So in the US before, it was Washington, LA, Chicago, and New York. However, you know, we have daily basis people reaching out to us from Austin and Texas and various other places. And the same principle applies. So we are going to ask for, if there's X amount of people that meet a threshold in that location, the expectation would be for the IEC and Home Affairs and DIRCO to put up a voting station there. So obviously we expect several more places in the US. The thing is with the US is that because it's so big, it is very much a case of people are dispersed. Where places like Australia, places like so Australia, there are natural hubs. In New Zealand, there are natural hubs. In the UK, there are natural hubs. But obviously, the US has many hubs. So in 2019, in the US, you could vote in Washington, New York, Chicago, and Los Angeles. But we have people reaching out to us from Austin and Texas to several other places. So wherever there's certain volumes of people, we will push for voting stations.
So you would be lobbying not only the IEC, but specifically Dirco.
Well, the way it works is, so the chain, if you think about it, is that the IEC can only implement what the law says. The law is dictated by the Electoral Act, unless there are court orders that overrides the Electoral Act at that point. Now, the courts do not like people going to the courts and overriding the parliamentary process, and so they frown upon it if you skip a step. So our step number one is we are engaging with Dirco via our Shadow Minister for Foreign Relations in order to ask them, please designate these temporary overseas foreign missions, which hopefully they do. And if they don't, we will then obviously try to go through the parliamentary process of changing the Electoral Act, of which there isn't enough time left anymore, and then we'll mount the court case. But we can only mount the court case after we've said we've done step one and step two. So step one is we will be requesting Dirco to do that. If they say yes, then they have to declare those places, and then nothing else needs to change, because then the IEC can just use those foreign missions then as voting stations. However, if Dirco doesn't play ball, then we will have to force their hand to do that.
And what kind of numbers are we talking about? What are you hoping to achieve? Because when you look at official numbers, they're not as many South Africans. When you actually live in one of these countries, there are a lot more.
Exactly. So census data is really skewed, and every country has a different way of asking questions, depending on, they'll ask you, where you were born or where you go to university or what your nationality is. And so you can't rely on census data. And so we have used a variety of sources and gotten to a place whereby, obviously there's no direct number of how many people are overseas. However, we know where majority of South Africans are. And so our target is to get 200,000 people registered online. Now, in 2015, only 31,000 people were registered. So we want 200,000 because it's now gone from a physical process to an online process. And obviously then from that point, it's all about voter turnout, because unfortunately, voting is still in person, not online or any other method. And so our steps is make sure we get people registered. And if we get 200,000 people registered, we use those numbers to get more voting stations where those people are registered ultimately. And then we want to increase the voting stations from 125 to at least 138, but more if we actually have people in locations that we didn't previously budget for.
That would give you how many seats?
Well, so of these 200,000 people that we want to get registered, we want to aim to get 100,000 DA votes. And depending on the turnout of the election, and because there are 400 seats in Parliament, and let's say, for example, then if 20 million people turn out to vote, that means 50,000 people equals one MP. So our objective is to get 2 MPs elected to Parliament with the overseas vote, so 100,000 votes. But the main number is 200,000 registrations. That's where we start. Without these registrations, we can't get anything done. So step number one, everyone. Step number one, just register online.
So that's your final message to South Africans?
Exactly. Step number one, register online. That is the first domino in the entire process.
And get your documents in order that you can do that.
Exactly.
And if you don't, the DA will help you.
Precisely. So we have an escalation process directly to Department of Home Affairs via our Shadow Minister of Home Affairs back in SA. And if you can't get through your embassy, if you've been waiting for months, if they're just not helping you, please get in contact with us via our website, and we will happily escalate that for you, because this is just so important and so crucial.
Ludré Stevens from the DA abroad. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Linda.